What if what you're holding on to is slowly killing you? My friend, it's time to blow that up. I'm Sara Stansberry, coach, author, and recovering codependent. And on this podcast, you'll learn to break free from people-pleasing, heal from relationship wounds, and move beyond anxiety and self-doubt. Because sometimes you need to destroy what isn't working to build something beautiful. Welcome to How to Blow Up Your Life. Hello and welcome to How to Blow Up Your Life. I'm your host, Sara Stansberry, and today we're exploring something that impacts a lot of us, but sometimes is hard to recognize. And that is the patterns that we repeat in our relationships. Today's episode is all about breaking the cycle and identifying those unhealthy relationship patterns that keep us stuck. If you've ever found yourself thinking, like, why does this keep happening to me? Or how do I always end up with the same type of person? Or why do the same situations keep happening over and over again in my life? And then this episode is for you. We're going to explore what's behind relationship patterns, how to spot them, and most importantly, how to help stop those patterns from happening in your life. Let's start with the basics. First of all, what are relationship patterns? Well, they're recurring themes, behaviors, and dynamics that show up in our relationships. And I'm talking about any kind of relationship here. It can be romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships, and even in the workplace. In recovery, they say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's kind of how these patterns work. They're so ingrained and they feel so automatic and so normal and natural. You don't even know you're doing it until sometimes you'll stop and look around and think, how did I end up here again? Here's the thing about relational patterns. They don't just happen by chance. They're usually rooted in our early childhood experiences and what we've learned about love and safety and connection in relationships while we were growing up. Maybe you learn that love means being needed, so you consistently attract partners and choose people around you who rely on you to fix their problems. Or maybe you learn that conflict equals abandonment, so you avoid difficult conversations. You don't want to bring things up that are bothering you. And so you end up in these relationships that don't have much depth and don't have the connection that you want or are looking for. Let me walk you through some of the most common unhealthy relationship patterns that I've either experienced myself or seen in those around me or people I've worked with. First, there's the rescuer pattern. And this is when you consistently find yourself in relationships with people who need saving. And saving could mean that from addiction or financial problems or emotional instability or just general life chaos. You might tell yourself when you're in this pattern that you're being loving and supportive, but underneath there's usually a fear that if someone doesn't need you, then you don't bring any value to the relationship. So essentially, the rescuer believes that their worthiness comes in how they can save, and sometimes they call this help, the people around them. A lot of times, rescuers believe that what they're doing is helping, but really what they're really doing is enabling the person. And it doesn't make for healthy, connected relationships when that happens, because there's kind of like a power imbalance, and there's an underlying almost like, how do I put this, reward system for the rescuer, that if the person can remain needy in some way, shape, or form, then they will remain valuable, if that makes sense. So it's a little bit of a tricky one. Another one that I see sometimes is this kind of weird push-pull thing that happens in relationships where the people are either like completely enmeshed in one another, or they have no relationship at all. And so it's kind of that classic when you think about this one, you think a lot of times about like boyfriend, girlfriend situations in young people where they're on again, off again, on again, off again. But this dynamic really can happen in any kind of relationship. It can happen in a friendship. It can especially happen in families where you've got this kind of parent-child thing where the parent-child are completely enmeshed or they don't talk at all. This a lot of times stems from like when there's a conflict between the two people of like the need for intimacy and also the need for independence. So one person needs this intimacy and the other person needs the independence. And so until that can get resolved, it can just go on and on, on. Thus the pattern. We also have another one that I've seen is this kind of perfectionist pattern where either you or the other person feels they must be perfect in order to be worthy of love or worthy to be in the relationship. And that creates something that it's a dynamic where the relationship is built on performance instead of connection. And so it's all about like how much I do and how I never do anything wrong or what have you. And it erodes, it really erodes the connection between the two people. Then there's the kind of like a critic defender pattern where one person is constantly criticizing and the other person is constantly defending their position or their point of view or what have you. And this does create kind of a weird parent-child thing that erodes equality and respect in the relationship. And finally, there's this pattern that people get into of choosing unavailable partners or friends where basically you want to be in a relationship with people who are not capable or unwilling to really support your emotional needs. And a lot of people get into that kind of relationship because there's a part of them that believes that they don't really deserve love or a full and sustaining relationship. So why do we do this, right? Like what makes us get into these unhealthy patterns? Well, they don't develop in a vacuum and they just don't show up one day. They are usually the result of some adaptive behavior that we learned in childhood to survive our family environment. For instance, if you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, then you might have learned to get attention through achievement or even caretaking of that parent. Another example is that if conflict in your family meant danger, meant like disconnection, or it meant like that maybe you would be cast out or threatened to be cast out or what have you, then you might grow up thinking that, you're not going to have any conflict in your adult relationships because then you may get cast out of that relationship. Trauma also plays a very significant role in these patterns, and unresolved trauma from our childhood often gets like re-scripted in our current adult lives and relationships because essentially unconsciously, and we don't know that we're doing this, but unconsciously we're trying to kind of master or like what we couldn't control in the past, if that makes sense. So on an unconscious level, we recreate some of these pain points from our childhood so that we can kind of win the situation because we feel like if we do, it will make us feel more powerful or, more in control and safer, essentially. I call this going around the mountain because you will continue to go around and around and around the mountain. And the scenery might look a little bit different, but you will continue to go around until you can kind of heal these childhood wounds and break free of the pattern. So how do we break these cycles? How do we stop going around the mountain? The first step, as they say, is awareness. and you cannot change what you cannot see. So nothing is truer. I know it sounds trite, but nothing is truer. If you're not recognizing that you're in some of these unhealthy relational patterns, then there's no chance that you can break free from them. So that is the first step, is always to have awareness. You can start that by looking at your relationship history, and really the conflict in your relationship history, especially. What conflict keeps showing up? Again, I encourage you to map out not just your romantic relationships or your partnerships, but really almost all of your relationships. If there's something that keeps coming up, like one central conflict keeps coming up, there's probably something there. And more importantly, ask yourself how you feel in your different kinds of relationships. Because if you're experiencing the same negative feelings and across the board in all sorts of relationships, there's probably something there that you are in a pattern and might benefit from trying to heal whatever's creating that pattern. So ask yourself, how are you feeling? And are you experiencing the same negative feelings across the gamut, across the board in all of your relationships? And also ask yourself, what themes are you noticing in your relationships? Do you have this thing where you're constantly rescuing people? Are you avoiding conflict? Like I said, up in the beginning of the episode, are you in a situation where you're the one constantly needing to be rescued? All of those are really important questions to ask, and the answers that you get from those will be really helpful. Now, it takes two to tango, right? As they say. And it takes two to be in a relationship. So taking responsibility is the second and very important step of breaking free from these unhealthy relational patterns. And doing so without self-blame is really critical, because in every relationship, it does take two people. And so if there's a problem in the relationship, you are part of that problem. I love you so much. You are part of that problem if there's a problem in the relationship. So really taking a step back and figuring out what your responsibility is or was in that relationship is very, very helpful, because it will help you really, really track down what about your behavior was impacting the relationship negatively. And, don't be hard on yourself. I hope that if you hear this, you won't be critical of yourself, because we all deal with it. And, know that this is what you learned to survive in your childhood. You learned how to interact with people. You learned how to be in relationships from what you were taught and what you learned. And we are all going through that, whether we know it or not. We are all figuring it out. So there's nothing wrong with you if you get into this process. Here's the beautiful thing about taking responsibility, though. And this is what nobody will tell you, but I am going to tell you. When you take responsibility, it gives you the power to change. Did you hear me there? When you take responsibility, it gives you the power. Because when we blame others for our issues, in relationships or anywhere else, when we blame somebody else, then we are essentially handing our power over to them on a silver platter. And we don't want to do that, right? We want to be very powerful. So taking responsibility, the second thing. The third thing that you can do is start to develop new responses to these patterns that you have discovered. And this is where the real work begins. If your pattern is to rescue, practice letting others handle their own problems. And if your pattern is to avoid conflict, practice having difficult conversations. If your pattern is to lose yourself in relationships, practice maintaining your own interests and friendships. Those are all things that you can do to help break the relationship patterns. Now, creating new patterns requires patience with yourself and self-compassion, like we talked about before. Your old patterns, remember, helped you survive. And it's important that we honor that. And we also recognize that what helped you survive in the past may not be working for you now. And that, my friend, is why the art of creative destruction is so important, because it helps you break down those patterns that aren't working so you can build new ones that will. And so when you're starting this process, I encourage you to start very, very small, like really small, micro steps. Which I'm so guilty about this, if you text somebody back immediately because you just want them to know you're on the ball, or if it's a love interest, you want them to know you're interested, take a beat. Try waiting a few minutes. You don't have to respond to everybody right away. It's not your job. If you usually say yes to everything without considering what it is that you really want to do, why don't you maybe you can practice saying, you don't have to say no right away, but you can practice saying, oh, you know what, let me think about that and get back to you. It's okay. It's okay to do that. If you typically avoid expressing your needs, practice thinking about what it is that you need, and expressing that one time a week or whatever number feels good to you. So start small. And if you are interested in taking a deep dive or diving in a little bit deeper, don't forget, you can download my free creative destruction workbook. You can get the link. I think it'll be in the show notes and on my website. And it is free, and it will kind of guide you through the beginning steps of creative destruction to help you break some of these patterns that you might be in. One final thought. Remember, the goal here isn't to find all the perfect people around you who aren't going to trigger you. The goal here is to become the kind of person that can recognize when they're in a pattern, an unhealthy pattern, and can help break that cycle so that you can have healthier and more fulfilling relationships. It's not easy work, but it is doable, my friend. I promise you. Now, every time you catch yourself in an old unhealthy pattern, you can choose differently. You can choose differently at any point of the game, even if you haven't gotten it right 4 or 5 times, the next time you can. And it is possible to create everything that you want. It's possible to create everything that you want in this life and in your relationships. And I'm excited to watch you do just that. As you do it, be gentle with yourself. Start to notice. Awareness is the first step. Don't forget. And don't forget to download my free workbook if you would like to take a deep dive. You can get that on my website, sarastansberry.com. If this episode resonated with you, if you liked it, I would appreciate it if you shared it with somebody that you think might benefit. And remember, you deserve relationships that feel safe. And you deserve relationships that are supportive and authentic. And the work you're doing to break these patterns is going to bring you closer to that reality. So keep going. Thank you for listening to How to Blow Up Your Life. If you like this show, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it, and it helps more than you know. You can join me on Substack at sarastansberry.substack.com, where we continue these conversations. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Sara Stansberry. This podcast is produced by Shout More Quietly Productions. Music by Jay Ferris. All links and information are in the show notes. Now go forward and blow up your life.